Well, we have come to the last session of this morning, and we will move on to a panel talk about fintech. And the title of the topic is, What Will Become of Banking in 2025? Finance in an Age of Disruption, which sounds very interesting. So we've got some people here to talk about this. We cannot think of anyone better to discuss this topic than the experts that we have lined up for you here today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. First up, we have the counsel at Flourish Ventures, Mr. Neil Dugal. Then we have general partner at 500 Startups, Mr. Rishi Mohnot. Third, we have the partner at 500 Startups as well, Mr. Sheel Mohnot. And finally, we have the founder of Cafedam, the founder of Cafedam, Kun Suthichai Yoon, who will be our moderator. All right, so now please give a warm round of applause for our next panel.
Hi. And good noon, exactly noon. And
Ready for lunch?
Yes, we're all ready for lunch. And I promise I'll work up your appetite for lunch.
Yeah, let's get you ready for lunch.
Yes, because we are talking about one day soon there will be no more banks.
I don't think that's true.
No?
No.
I want a big debate on that. But someone said that struck me as very interesting. He said, banking takes place everywhere except at the bank from now on. So we're talking about 2025, and the big topic is what will happen to banking. My big question for you guys is, what do I tell my banker friends? 5 years from now, are they going to lose their jobs? You?
Oh, me first. So it really depends on what kind of banking friends you're talking to. Is it investment banking friends or retail banking friends? Who's the audience here?
Well, normal commercial bank.
Normal commercial banks? My argument would be that in 2025, if the normal commercial banks don't adapt to technology and the way customers use banks in the future, they'll be extinct and replaced by other players who do it well.
Yeah, I don't think that your friends are bank tellers. If they are, you should tell them they should start going to training classes in data science or taking courses. Maybe they should look into a barista job. But yeah.
This guy is about 40 years old. He is senior vice president of a bank. And he says he's ready to adjust, to adapt, to be disrupted. How do I tell him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that every bank is going to have to change, just like every business in the tech-enabled economy is going to have to change. And I think big banks, I'm a fan of some big banks, and I think some of them can change. I think elephants can dance. So I think some of them will adapt to the new economy, and some of them will be displaced by the new disruptors that are going to come out, the neobanks.
You're biased because you invest in a fintech, right?
Yeah.
So if you want fintech to succeed, banks must collapse. Banks.
That's not true.
No?
No.
No?
No. So
Banks do not become bankrupt?
Look, most of these fintech companies set out to disrupt the banks originally.
Yes.
And then now what we've realized many years in is actually we're all partnering with the banks. And I think,
you cannot beat them, you join them.
Well, we're chipping away at their core businesses, but ultimately for regulatory reasons, many times we need to partner with the bank. So 2025 is not that far away. I don't think everyone's in danger of losing their job at the big banks. I think they'll continue to exist. And they have some pretty big moats. One is people hate changing their bank account. So I still have the same bank account I had when I was 18 years old. And that's very common. People keep the same bank account for a long time. There's not like a killer need to change. I remember, like, I think about changing my bank account as like changing my email address. When do you change your email address? Like, there has to be something so much better. I remember when Gmail came out, I had a Hotmail account. Hotmail gave me 15 megabytes of space. Gmail gave me 1 gigabyte of space.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I need to change now. But before, other than that, like, it's hard to imagine changing your core bank account. Now, it is happening.
What would make you change your bank account? What has to happen?
Yeah, so I think what people have delivered so far is a better user experience. And one of the problems is, because of regulatory reasons, these neobanks can't do as many things as they want to do. And so what people have done that have been effective at these neobanks that have been effective is they've started with one particular pain point, gone after it, and made it really easy or cheap. So the neobanks in Europe, for example, they started with cross-border payments. Many people in Europe travel across borders all the time, and they have an issue with currency conversion. So Revolut, N26, Monzo, they all said it's going to be free to travel across border, and you can choose the currency you want to pay in, no problem. And that was a great pain point that they solved for Europe. So I think you have to start with a particular niche.
Rishi, what do banks have to do to survive?
So they have to adapt. They have to develop a lot of the technologies that some of these neobanks are doing, right? So I'm a millennial. I'm a young user of banking solutions. I never go to a bank. I've never written a check in my life, right?
Never?
No.
Wow.
If I need a check, I have my parents write it for me. I don't know how to use
doesn't
these
count.
old
You are a spoiled
count.
kid.
He's a
I do
very
everything
spoiled
on my
kid.
phone. These older technologies are not going to be used by as many people. And what I want to do is be able to do everything on my phone. Now, I can do a lot with. I also have not changed my bank since I was since I started making any money when I was like 16. And my bank can do some things, but I have started using other solutions, not as my core bank, but to do additional things. When I want to pay my friends, I don't use my bank because my bank doesn't have a good solution for it, right? Eventually, that's going to be a problem. So today, I still keep my core deposits in the same place. But one day, as these other companies start chipping away at individual services that I use as part of my overall banking solution, one day I'll say, you know what? I don't need to keep my core banking deposits at PNC. I can move them somewhere else. And that's where the real dollars in the banking economy shift.
Now, yesterday there was this big announcement from Facebook that they are launching their coin, their cryptocurrency called Libra. That will seriously affect the payment systems, the banking system. How do you see that affecting not only the banks, but also consumers like us?
I think the bull case for Libra is that Facebook has very good customer retention, very good. They've acquired many users in emerging markets, and that's a key area where you can bank people who are unbanked. So that's a big win for them. But on the flip side, it's going to be hard for them to gain traction if regulators don't, want to create an environment that's conducive for Libra to flourish. And so that's going to be a big factor for them. And we're right now in a climate where there's a lot of distrust by regulators of Facebook in particular. The second aspect is consumers. Consumers might not be so keen to maybe, in their mind, sacrifice privacy to go onto the Libra platform. I think consumers tend not to be as fixated on privacy as some would believe, but that could be a factor in consumer adoption.
But don't you think, Facebook already has, basically all the KYC AML things they need for 2.5 billion people. So, what additional privacy would they?
I completely agree. So I don't think practically it makes a difference, but the perception is that you're somehow giving up more information by also transacting through Facebook.
Yeah.
They will know exactly how much you spend on what, when, why. They even know what color you like.
They already know a lot of things that you don't know.
And now they know more because they will know whether you are a rich person or you.
Facebook already knows if you're rich or not, and because they can infer it based on so much other information they have.
It's pretty easy. That's really easy. I mean, you've worked in this sector.
So is it a good thing or bad thing for Facebook to come up with their own cryptocurrency?
So I think one thing about this is, if you really look at the details, Facebook has actually tried to make it seem like it's not Facebook's solution. It's a solution with a lot of partners. It's
27.
Yeah, 27 partners, and they are
launch.
just one partner. And obviously, they're the driving factor behind it. Now, the problem is, Facebook also has a public relations problem, right? A lot of folks in government don't like Facebook.
Do you like Facebook?
I mean, I'm a user of Facebook.
Do you like Facebook or not?
I like them. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. They know lots about me, and I'm okay with that.
Do you like Facebook?
It's okay.
It's okay. What does it mean? So.
It's so-so.
I love Facebook. I think it's a great company, and they make very good products that I'm happy to use.
Do they pay tax in America?
They do pay taxes.
They do, but they don't pay tax here.
Oh, really?
They probably pay some tax here. When they
Uh-huh.
make money on ad revenue, they have to pay it here.
Sometimes they pay tax when they cannot evade.
Yeah.
Well-
Well, as a shareholder, I think it's great. Like, I think
You are a
as
shareholder.
as
You are a shareholder of Facebook.
Yeah.
Wow.
And as a shareholder, I think every company should be doing whatever they can to pay the minimum taxes. So, I'm
How
happy.
do we make them pay tax in Thailand?
Well, I don't know. Regulators have a lot of sway over what Facebook does.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there's something that can be done.
Yeah. Neil?
What's the question?
The question is it a good or bad thing? And should we welcome Libra? Should we welcome or should we be a bit hesitant and maybe check it out first?
I mean, I think it's incredible for the ecosystem in blockchain and cryptocurrency that Facebook is doing this, because it's clear that a major player in the technology world
Yeah.
is trying to accomplish something in the blockchain and crypto space. It lends a space legitimacy, whereas previously and currently still, there's a lot of fraud and deception happening in crypto. So I think it's a positive development, but there are still a lot of to be determined. For instance, they're trying to launch Libra is purported to be a stable coin,
Stable
but
coin, right.
historically, stable coins haven't really functioned that well in cryptocurrency for a number of reasons. And it's
Maybe
not
do you
clear
want to
to me-
explain what a stablecoin is for the audience?
Yeah, so stablecoins basically a kind of cryptocurrency that's pegged to the value of a fiat currency. In the case of Libra, it's pegged to the value of a basket of fiat currencies. And the idea of currency pegging is not new in the currency world.
They're talking about being pegged to a basket of currencies, including the US dollar, the euro, and maybe the yuan. Is that stable enough?
It's not just about linking it, it's also about how you keep your reserves.
Yeah.
And how you keep your reserves in comparison to fluctuations in price and value, both in the Facebook, on the Libra side and on the fiat side. And it's actually very challenging for a company to do this. It's very challenging for countries to do this.
Yeah.
5-6 years ago, the Swiss National Bank pegged their currency to the dollar, and they were finding themselves having to purchase a lot of dollars to maintain the peg.
Sure.
And this is no small task for any government. And you're saying that Facebook can do this, it's not very clear.
But is it more trustworthy than Bitcoin then? Bitcoin is not a stable coin. Bitcoin is no peg, so to say.
I mean, I think there are pluses and minuses of Libra versus Bitcoin, but also there's no reason to say that they can't exist at the same time.
I've asked the three of them whether they have invested in Bitcoin, and they all say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
so we can really get some insights into.
A long time ago. I'm not saying you should buy it at this price.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, you're the smart one.
No, if you compare Bitcoin with Libra,
So yeah, I think they can coexist. I think Libra serves a very different function. I think there's potentially a lot of value to a large player standing behind a stable currency that can be used for everyday transactions.
Like the U.S. dollar?
Yeah, but there's a lot of value of it being decentralized, right?
Yeah.
There are large players standing behind it, but and I think the problem is because it's Facebook in the news, right? That Facebook is pushing this forward. It may not be seen as decentralized, but the point of a cryptocurrency is it's supposed to be decentralized.
Yeah.
I think they shouldn't have called it. They shouldn't have led with Facebook on it. They should have said this is a consortium that's consortium effort. Now, Facebook said they're never going to control more than 1% of Libra. So it's actually like, to your point, it is relatively decentralized.
So it's a bad PR move.
Maybe. I think just Facebook has a lot of bad PR, has had a lot of bad PR in the past year and a half. And I think they almost don't realize how bad the PR has been for them.
You don't realize it?
I think so. Like,
Why don't you write a message to Mark Zuckerberg and tell him that you don't know how bad your image is?
well, if you think about how they've handled a lot of the sort of PR scandals that have come up, they didn't handle them very well.
No, right.
If you look at the pictures of Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of the Senate, he does not look good. And maybe he thinks he looks good, but it is not a good look.
So now with Bitcoin, with Libra coming up, what do you think the role of the central bank is going to be? We talk about the threat to commercial banks, but I think the threat is also on the central bank.
I have a bold prediction to make. In 2025, central banks will still exist.
Very bold.
Do you think that they will exist? Well, in 2025 probably, but like, let's say 2030, 2040.
Yeah.
I can imagine a world where not every central bank that exists today exists then, and it would first be these like tiny countries that most of us had never even heard of.
Yeah.
But like the job that they do as a central bank, like they shouldn't be doing. It doesn't make sense. They should either peg themselves to the U.S. dollar or some other currency, which could be Libra. You know.
So regulators are going to die. We don't need regulators anymore.
I'm not
Regulators
sure
are
that's the
not going to
conclusion.
die.
Huh?
Regulators are not going to die because they won't let you.
Everybody dies.
Let them die.
Who won't let them die?
I mean, governments won't let them die as long as
Well,
governments
governments
are
die
stable.
too.
The government of Thailand has been lasted a very long time. It's done quite well. So
No, this is a real, major change in our daily life. If commercial banks are going to change so much that you cannot recognize them in, say, 10 years' time, central banks may be still there, but the role will change dramatically.
Yeah.
I think if you look at central banks, in many cases are very well run, right? Because they're not like governments that are run by professional lawmakers or lawyers, no offense, Neil. Most of them, they're run by economists, right? And academics, people who spend most of their days thinking about problems, right?
Yeah.
And so they are thinking about all of this stuff. They're thinking about what's coming. They're thinking about how to regulate. They're thinking about how to adapt what they do and how they
That
function
said,
as part of the government.
academics are not necessarily the best people to run a central bank.
No. Who is a good manager of the central bank? Not academic, business people?
I'm actually not sure what the answer to that question is. I mean, if you look at the U.S., for instance, the Fed came out yesterday and said they're going to lower interest rates again probably this year,
Yes.
which is crazy when you think about it.
Yes.
Because if you look at fiscal policy and how it's created a massive appreciation in all sorts of other assets, is this a good path to be going down? You've seen people talk about modern monetary theory, which is also a fairly dumb concept. But they've been saying these things, and you're thinking in your mind, oh, these are smart people, they're very accomplished, but they could be leading us to financial crisis 3.0, which could look a lot worse than
Do
financial
you think
crisis
Donald
2.0.
Trump should fire the Fed chairman?
I'm not sure he can.
Well, he said he can. He said he consulted his advisors and he can.
I think he consulted them, and his advisors said no.
His advisors are also
But Jeremy
don't have a good
Powell
track
said, I checked the rules. I can stay 4 years. I don't accept any threat to fire me.
I mean, the independence of the Fed from the president is one of the most important aspects of the central bank in the U.S.
Yes.
The moment that crumbles, a lot of confidence is lost in the dollar, I would assume.
Yeah, let's imagine 2025. The scenario of banking will change quite a bit. But what do you see as the extent of the change in 6 years from now, 2025? What do you see as the medium case scenario?
Yeah, I think the underlying infrastructure is going to stay the same. Like, not much is going to change in 6 years.
Yeah.
I think how we interact will change, and so that's what I'm most excited about. Is a better user experience for everyone. And I think it's going to be, we're not going to bank only with our bank, but we're going to bank everywhere. And
Well, banking will take place on your mobile phone.
well, that's already the case.
It
right?
is already.
So forget about banking itself, but like think about all these other apps that you use on your phone. Like, if you look at many of the top, say, 10 apps that are used globally, many of them will have a banking component, right? So WeChat, China has kind of led the way here, where WeChat has a big payments component, and they're adding in other banking functionalities as well. I think every other app in that sort of top 10, most of them are owned by Facebook, Google. They're also looking at WeChat and saying, how do we get into this business?
Yeah.
And Libra is a piece of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I definitely agree with all of that. I think the user experience is going to get better. I think a lot of the traditional tech-enabled aspects of fintech are just going to get better and better. But I think what will be really interesting in the next 5 years is a lot of times with sort of new innovations and new disruptions, what you see is there's somebody who tries and fails, and they pave the way for the guys who are coming, right? So with Facebook, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there was this company called Friendster, that started before. They were sort of the first social network, and they ended up failing, but they paved the way for Facebook and some of the guys to come later. And so I think some of the first sort of neobanks that are going to do traditional banking functions, that they're going to accept core deposits, that they're going to have access to the Fed discount window, right? I think you might see the first signs of that will pave the way for what is to come.
I think there are two stories here. There's one about the developing world and one about the developed world. In the developed world, we're hopefully going to see consumers move to more consumer-friendly banks, banks that have business models that are not predatory on their customers, and banks that help their customers improve their financial lives. And I don't know if it's the neobanks that are going to do this or the incumbent banks that will do this. Hopefully, it's going to be one or the other. Either the neobanks do it, or the neobanks challenge the incumbents to actually match them in the customer experience. But in the developing world, so in the US and in other markets, it's about making the underbanked better banked. Mm-hmm. In the developing world, it's about making the unbanked banked. So the idea is that clearly having a bank account is good for you. And so trying to get as many people onto a bank account as possible in the developing world is going to be a big shift there. But we might see that in the developing world, as unbanked become banked, they kind of leapfrog and go straight to digital.
The definition of a banker will change dramatically.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and one that I sort of missed. I guess in this panel so far, I've been guilty of taking a US-centric view. But if you look at globally, the developing world has so much opportunity. By 2025, there'll be another 2 billion people with smartphones than there are today.
Yes.
And the majority of these 2 billion people are unbanked. And if I look at like even just my own history, I worked in microfinance a decade ago. I was taking a bus and then riding on the back of somebody's motorcycle to serve one borrower in a farm in India. And now if I think about it, that seems silly. Like it was so expensive for me to travel to visit one borrower, and now it's all done on the smartphone. And that is a huge unlock for much of the world that's very exciting.
And that's the challenge that's the exact type of issue we try to address at Flourish.
Now he's pitching his fund.
I don't have to pitch the fund. We invest in a lot of developing markets. We find that the biggest challenges consumers face in those markets is sending money, and so and sending money across borders. And so tackling that problem is actually a very unique puzzle in every single market that we invest in. Tackling this problem in, say, India is not the same as tackling this problem in Nigeria.
Let's look at America, China, and India. China seems to have gone very fast in terms of banking technology or fintech. America, of course, is still the leader, but you never know. 5 years from now, maybe China would overtake America. But India, where does India stand in fintech compared to China?
So I would say you're totally right. Like China, actually, so my own history, like 10 years ago, I thought, India is so well poised to create many of the new internet companies. They English speaking, great software engineers, etc. But what's happened actually is China, which didn't have these favorable things, has created many of the global internet companies. And I think like in the next coming years, now I was talking about the top 10 apps, many of them will be Chinese run. And
why is India so much behind China?
yeah, so India has been
Democracy. What? Democracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Democracy.
It's definitely a part of it. It's definitely a part of it. I think India has had this history of like trying to serve everybody, and they haven't been able to like choose a particular sector to focus on.
Yeah.
And they've also been really copying the West, but now actually they're starting to copy the East. So there's a company Paytm that I'm invested in that is basically a payments app that's now got investment from Alibaba and others, so it's trying to be like the WeChat for India.
These three guys are fascinating to me. They are investors in startups in America. One of them is a startup operator. They were born in America of Indian parents. They work and they grow and they prosper in America. And I urge them to take over America from Donald Trump. But, they have to
Working
work
on it
very hard.
slowly.
But I'm very interested in China and India, the comparison. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, so I think to that point, a little bit tongue-in-cheek about democracy, but I think...
No, this is a real issue. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a joke. Whether the democratic system and the communist system is good for digital transformation.
Yeah, I mean, my father left India many years ago because he felt it wasn't free enough, and we've prospered in America.
Yeah.
But and we love the freedom of America. But in many ways, China is able to accomplish so much more, so much faster, because of essentially the lack of freedom. And I think India has many regulatory hurdles in setting up a business, especially in banking. And that's caused a lot of slowdowns and a lot of other issues in India. But I think China has really paved the path ahead. And I think part of it is actually, you talked about America being the leader. I'm not so sure.
You're not sure now?
Especially in fintech, especially in banking.
And AI.
I think that there are a lot of cases where there's sort of a leapfrog of technology, and America will have to catch up, right? Because people are already using established technology, whereas new people coming online in China are just using whatever is the latest thing. And so, to Neil's point about sort of the developing world jumping to the newest technology, in a lot of cases, the developed world will then have to learn from that. So I think there's a lot of sort of reverse learning that will be really interesting to see in the next 10 years.
You, America, China, and India, where do you see them in 5 years' time?
I mean, the problem with India is that we call it a democracy, but the reality is that corruption is so horrible.
Well, isn't democracy always corrupt?
Power corrupts. But the U.S. is not that much better.
Right.
It's incredibly corrupt in various other ways. Where there are regulators, people find a way to work around them. The thing about China is that China has invested a lot in infrastructure, and America's infrastructure is crumbling from what it once was, and India kind of hasn't really built theirs up very well. And so you'll find that I'm a big believer in compound interest in many things in life.
Yeah.
The benefits of good infrastructure will compound to give them a really huge advantage down the line. It's just a no-brainer in my mind.
So are you afraid of China?
I'm not afraid of China. That's kind of loading the question. I think China will do well for itself.
But you work in America, and if America is behind China, you are in trouble.
I can always just say I'm Indian then.
I don't think it's a winner-take-all world, but I definitely, in terms of being afraid
But
of
you
China.
see, this trade war,
Yeah.
sometime, somewhere, there will be a decision of who wins this war, right? So if America loses the war, and China wins the war, and 5G, Huawei, is everywhere in the world, what do you guys will be doing in America?
I mean, that's a very sort of the pie cannot grow version of the world, right? No one wins in a trade war. Trade is good for everyone.
Yes.
Free trade, libertarian economist.
That's the American way.
Now, are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic. I think the trade war is bad for America personally, but I'm very optimistic on China's future. I think, we look at it from the U.S., we tend to look at it with a very dystopian eye. And if you ask in the U.S., what is the most hated company right now, they would say Huawei. I think actually in other parts of the world, people might say Facebook. And I think that we, we actually, which company is invading privacy?
Yeah.
In the U.S., people would say Huawei. In much of the world, people would say Facebook.
Right. So where they are equally bad.
I don't think they're equally bad. I think, and by the way, Huawei, I don't think is any worse than many other companies.
Yeah.
I think that, and many U.S. companies are also offering information to the U.S. government that the same thing that Huawei is doing. I don't think that Huawei is much worse than many U.S. companies.
Last question. Will Donald Trump be reelected? You can vote, right? The three of you.
Yeah.
You have the voting rights, right?
Yeah.
I believe so.
You are afraid.
I am afraid, but I also believe so he'll be elected. I'm afraid because he'll be reelected.
I'm optimistic, not about the Democratic Party, but that something will emerge that people will be sane. But I'm not too worried in general.
No.
America's done fine the last 4 years. There's some stuff that's not so great, but it'll continue to do fine.
You think it would be either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders and not Donald Trump?
Yeah, or hopefully one of the other options.
Yeah.
You have the final word.
I know. Unfortunately, I also think that Donald Trump will be reelected. I think there are many great candidates in the Democratic field.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders not being one of them. But I'm optimistic for the future of America. But if Donald Trump gets reelected, like Rishi said, it's not the end of the world. I think many of us were really upset when he got elected a few years ago. But now things aren't so bad. Everything. If the economy's doing well, people aren't that worried. And I think Donald Trump is doing all he can to make sure that the economy stays great until the election, and then who knows what happens.
Okay, let's hope for the best. Thank you very much. Give them a great big hand.